Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I want to get to a JoJo press conference. Russia provokes U.S. in largest military exercise since Cold War before Biden-Putin meeting. And this, Israel launches airstrikes on Gaza as ceasefire crumbles because of some sort of balloons, incendiary balloons from the territory. And so things are falling apart for JoJo right before meeting with Putin. People send me gasps from this press conference, and there's another thing I want to cover where he's meeting with the European Union or whatever it is, the EU. And JoJo's such, this is documentation that the left and the Joe Biden voters and supporters need to be embarrassed, right? Like, I don't vote, so I can always say these things, right? Their whole claim to fame that he was going to be so much better than Trump, but he isn't. Like, he's a joke out there. The Europeans, everybody covering this knows, they're not suppressing this so much in other countries like they do here in America. And so this guy, he just can't do it. He can't do the job. He's not capable.
It's being treated that way. So we're going to provide up to $2 billion to support developing countries as they transition away from unabated coal-fired power. In addition, we also agreed to tackle corruption, which is a threat to societies everywhere.
Now, like for a guy who has a son, Hunter Biden, the corruption aspect of his personal life, But look at the low energy. Like, this is, JoJo comes out and yells a lot, gets fired up, right? And he's got these moments where he shows some life force. But most of the time, he has very low energy, even more so in this. You'll see this even more so in the European Union meeting, but he's got very low energy. Like, he he appears to be very weak.
I pointed out in the conversation I had with one of the leaders of, with China.
You couldn't remember China?
It was a request for me not to try to, when I was asked what I was going to be doing after being elected, I said we're going to reestablish the strength of American relationships so we can be counted on again, alliances, and suggested.
See, he's crapping all over Trump here, right? Like, Trump did such a bad job and we're here to show you that we can do a better job. And that's not how these other countries are experiencing it. They see this guy, they know what happened. They're they're not buying into this fake narrative that so many Democrats and people who hated Trump bought into. The whole media argument and the Hollywood argument and the Democratic argument about Trump. They know that this guy was just sort of, forced upon the American people. And they can tell right off the bat he's not there, right? This is a guy who's, there's a lot of scams out there where people will scam the elderly. Like, elderly are getting, that's why they have LifeLock and all these, because they're not technologically savvy and they're just, not there. And people prey on the elderly because of, mental breakdown and just lack of awareness and things. And so this is what's going to happen with him as a world leader. Like, the other countries know that he's just not up to the challenge. Of course, he's got handlers and people there. The president really isn't the president, like I've said before, but there is some things here. There's some ways that they can play this guy. And when he's out there in negotiations, when he's out there in this sort of environment where he's got to be in front of the cameras and they can't hide him away, it is, they can take advantage of him.
That, maybe you shouldn't get the Quad, meaning India, Japan, Australia, and the United States working together. And maybe you shouldn't be pushing on strengthening the European Union to deal with the West, not just to have, and so on. And I said, for an American president every president to be sustained, or prime minister, has to represent the values of their country. And I pointed out, and I mean it sincerely, we're unique as a.
I mean it sincerely. Like, why do people say, I always talk about when people say, no, I'm being honest with you. And he says this all the time, not being salacious. No, I mean this. I really mean this, right? Because politicians just lie all the time. It's political talking points. And, JoJo's one of the worst. He just makes things up. And
as a country, we're unique in the sense that we're not based on ethnicity or geography or religion. We're one nation that said we organized on an idea. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. Sounds corny, but it's real. And any president who doesn't act consistent with what the raison d'etat for the nation is cannot be sustained at the support of that country. And so what we were able to do is we know that corruption undermines the trust in government, siphons off public resources, makes economies much less competitive.
He's got notes, right? He's reading his notes because they don't give him a teleprompter. And so he's got these things written for him.
And constitutes a threat to our security. So we're going to work together to address issues like the abuse of shell companies, money laundering through real estate transactions, and we've agreed that we're going to work together to address cyber threats from state and non-state actors like criminal ransomware networks and whole.
So the guy's just reading here, right? But not in a good way where they'd have teleprompters where he can make eye contact, and his energy's so low. Like, this is the guy who's representing America.
My colleagues about how we were all getting along together, but the truth of the matter is we did. I felt, it wasn't about me, but it was about America. I felt a genuine sense
Wait, it wasn't about you?
of enthusiasm that America was back at the table. And
because of Trump. Like, most of this stuff, his whole presidency is, well, I replaced Trump, and Trump was doing a horrible job. Like, that only can last so long. And certainly isn't going to play in these other countries who may or may not have liked Trump or thought Trump was doing a good job. Like, they're not saying, oh, wow, we got a real guy here. They got JoJo Magoo. This is a Mr. Magoo. Like, this is a guy who's a bumbling idiot who's out there and can't get the job done. And you can just see it, like how he is, just his energy and his consciousness, and he's lost and clueless. He's like Michael Scott from The Office. You can see it in these meetings, and I'll show you the meeting tomorrow with the EU. And he's completely oblivious to everyone else's reaction. We were all getting along really swell, and, there's a general sense of enthusiasm. Well, that's what you're thinking. That's your reading of the situation, because you're the guy that they're all making fun of and giving sideways looks about, and you're oblivious to it, right? There's that guy who, thinks he's rocking it, and everybody's like, making faces behind his back, hey, it's JoJo Magoo, and he's completely oblivious. I mean, being a Magoo, it means that you're completely oblivious to what's going on, and you're seeing things that no one else sees. And that's something you can see in him since, forever. He's always been like that. He's the clueless guy in the room.
And fully engaged. And now I'm going to be heading off to Brussels, to NATO, and many of the same people are going to be at that table, and in NATO, and to make the case we are back as well. We do not view NATO as a sort of a protection racket. We believe that
a protection racket. We don't view it as a protection racket. See, Trump said that he didn't want to be the world's police, where we had to fund or put our military out there for everything that happens to all the members of NATO. Many of them have a very weak military. And we're supposed to defend all these various countries from Europe. And when anything happens to them, we're supposed to be there for them because of these NATO accords and things like this. And so, many Americans agree with that. I was one of them. And JoJo's like, nah, we're going to come back and, we're going to we're going to pay for all these wars and fight all these wars for you guys. And, Americans aren't digging that anymore.
NATO is vital to our ability to maintain American security for the next remainder of the century. And there's a real enthusiasm. I made it clear, and I pointed out, and I thanked them, Article 5 is an attack on one, is an attack on all. Well, what Americans sometimes don't forget, remember what happened in 9/11. We were attacked. Immediately, NATO supported us. NATO supported us. NATO went till we got bin Laden. NATO was part of the process. And I want them to know, unlike whether they doubt it, that we believe NATO and Section 5 is a sacred obligation. Bottom line is, I think we've made some progress in reestablishing American credibility among our closest friends. And
Again on Trump, right? We've reestablished credibility. Like he's just trying to contrast his bumbling incompetence with Trump. Like that's all he's got. That's 100% his presidency. That was his campaign, and now it's his presidency. Oh, well, at least we're better than Trump. Like that's all he can say, right? That's all that's all he's got.
And our values. Now, why don't I take some of your questions? And I'm told, Jonathan, I'm supposed to recognize you first.
Wait a minute. They assigned you who you're supposed to recognize first? These are all pre-approved. These are pre-approved questions. I've been told that this is the order in which the questions are supposed to appear, because that's the way I have the answers written down. So I don't want to call in the wrong person and read the wrong answer to the wrong question. So let's start here. This is what I've been told to do by my handlers.
I appreciate that, sir. Thank you very much. Mr. President, Vladimir Putin, thank you. Vladimir Putin, who you'll be seeing in a few days in Geneva, said just a couple of days ago that he believed that U.S.-Russia relations were at a low point. In what concrete ways could your summit change that? And then secondly, on the same topic, you have said previously and in the run-up to the summit that you would be unafraid to call out Russia's disruptive actions like cyber hacks, Ukraine, election interference. But you're not having a joint press conference with Putin. Why not take the chance to stand side by side with him and say those things to him with the world watching?
Well, let me make it clear. I think he's right. It's a low point. And it depends on how he responds to acting consistent with international norms, which in many cases he has not.
It's his fault. It's Putin's fault. Like this is how he's going about everything, right? Like that's the way that the left is and the Democrats are pushing everything. That there is their way of looking at things, and this is how he's dealing with the Republicans, and everyone else is crazy, right? They're Trumpers. They're people that their opinions aren't valid. They're crazy conspiracy theorists, all these things, right? He's going to push this with Putin and everyone else, right? And because there's just a rigidity there. I've heard, and again, I'm not, there's no way for me to know if this is true, that he wakes up, with dementia-like symptoms and just starts yelling at people, in the morning, at night, or whatever it is. Like he's just lost it.
I told him when I was running and when I got elected, before I was sworn in, that I was going to find out whether or not he, in fact, did engage in trying to interfere in our election, that I was going to take a look at whether he was involved in a cybersecurity breach.
See, the thing is that America has not only tampered with elections, the CIA, but we've, deposed leaders. We've taken out leadership. We've been involved in regime change on a, level with the CIA and the intelligence community, so-called intelligence communities, but also just an all-out war. We've taken out leaders, manipulated governments, changed elections in other countries, but there's this arrogance in America that that's okay because we're the good guys, that we can do it. But if anybody tries to do it with us, then we're going to have a problem. And when you live with that sort of bullying mentality, where you can behave in such a way, but other people can't, then, that's when everything starts to crumble, because you lose legitimacy because you're fundamentally dishonest.
That occurred, et cetera. And if I did, I was going to respond. I did. I checked it out, so I had access to all the intelligence. He was engaged in those activities. I did respond and made it clear that I'd respond again. With regard to, I always found, and I don't mean to suggest that the press should not know, but this is not a contest about who can do better in front of a press conference or try to embarrass each other.
Yeah, because you'd lose.
It's about making myself very clear what the conditions are to get a better relationship are with Russia. We're not looking for conflict. We are looking.
Yeah, that's not true at all. They've been pushing Russia all the way back into Syria. So when Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama and Joe Biden were pushing for these regime change wars that came from, goes back all the way to the Bush years. So when Bill Clinton's Secretary of Defense, or whatever he was, the Secretary of the Joint Chiefs, the head of the Joint Chiefs, Wesley Clark, said he went back into the Pentagon and he had some former employees come up and say, it's really bad. We're going to invade 7 countries in 5 years. And he was freaked out, and he did an interview on PBS and said, this is what's happening. And then when Bush was gone, Obama continued on with that plan, because that's not what they're acknowledging here. That there was military actions and there was intelligence level stuff that was supposed to happen under Trump, and Trump just stopped it. Trump stopped all these invasions. He cut off, he didn't order, ISIS. Remember when ISIS was a thing? And he just stopped ordering ISIS to do things because ISIS was an American asset. It was the old Iraqi Republican Guard that was now under control of the American government. He stopped ISIS from doing stuff by just not, ordering them to do things, right? And so all those illegal wars that they were responsible for, the Bush Cheney and then the Obama Biden regimes, were stopped by Trump. That was one of the good things that Trump did. Trump is owned and he has his owners and handlers. I mean, there's lots of bad things about Trump. But one of the good things is he stopped all those illegal wars after the invasion of Libya for no reason. Like, Gaddafi was a good leader for his people, and he wasn't, he didn't need to be taken out. They just made up some bogus reason that the British Parliament acknowledged, and all these other people. I've covered that in other videos. And so they had all these illegal wars, and then finally when we tried to take over Syria, the Russians stood up against us, and they didn't like it. And from that moment on, there's been conflict with Russia from these people, from Hillary Clinton when she was running for president, and then Joe Biden. The whole Democratic, and the Democrats used to be the party of peace, right? And now they're party of war. And so, this is him being fundamentally dishonest. They're pushing Russia for whatever reason. Like they want World War III or something. Like, I don't know why, but it isn't good.
To resolve those actions which we think are inconsistent with international norms, number one. Number two, where we can work together, we may be able to do that in terms of some strategic doctrine that may be able to be worked together. We're ready to do it. And there may be other areas. There's even talk there may be the ability to work together on climate. So the bottom line is that I think the best way to deal with this is for he and I to meet, he and I to have our discussion. I know you don't doubt that I'll be very straightforward with him about our concerns.
Yeah, we don't have any, like straightforward as a crooked politician for 47 years. Like he tries to pose as a truth teller, and everybody kind of knows it's a joke. You can't be a career politician. His first job was being a senator.
Hands, how far do they talk, who talked the most, and the rest. Now, he can say what he said the meeting was about, and I will say what I think the meeting was about. That's how I'm going to handle it. I'm sorry, I'm going to get in trouble with staff if I don't do this the right way. Jennifer.
He's going to get in trouble with staff if he doesn't do it the right way. What? Like you're calling people in order? Why would you have some sort of an order here? Of course they're not yelling, hey, me. He's going to get in trouble if he doesn't do it the right way. Who are you going to get in trouble with? You're the president. They work for you.
For Jacob Bloomberg.
Thank you, sir. On China, China seems to be doing exactly what it wants to do with regard to Hong Kong, with regard to Xinjiang, with the South China Sea, and many other issues, despite pressure from you and from allies. The final language in the G7 communique does have some mentions of China, which is different from past years. but I know it's not as tough as you and your team wanted it to be. We saw a draft of the communique, and it's not quite as tough. So why isn't it as tough? There isn't very much action in it. There's some calls for China to be respectful, but why isn't that communique a little bit tougher? Are you disappointed in that? And what can you do to change some of these actions by China?
Well, first of all, I think as you know, last time the G7 met, there was no mention of China. But this time there is mention of China. The G7 explicitly agreed to call out human rights abuses.
So they gave him a prepared answer that he's reading. That's not how press conferences are supposed to work. Like, he's supposed to know stuff and be able to talk from his knowledge without, like, this is the teacher giving you the questions and then you being able to write the answers and bring them in and take the test, right? Open book test with pre-knowledge of the questions. Like, that's not how any of this stuff is supposed to work. This is completely controlled by him and his people, his handlers, to manipulate any sort of situation where JoJo's just going to blurt out stupid stuff because he's a gaff city. He's gaff city.
Steve Holland, Reuters.
Thank you, sir. Just to follow up on Jim's question, the communique cited a variety of fronts on China, everything from human rights, the origin of the COVID virus, Taiwan. What do you think China needs to do to ease tensions?
I think China has to start to act more responsibly in terms of international norms on human rights and transparency.
He's used to touching his face because of the mask, and now it's a habit. Like, he just did that a second ago.
In terms of international norms on human rights.
See? He's going for it here. And, this is a huge question because I just covered this in my other video. Jon Stewart came out and said, well, science has done a great job of creating a solution for a problem that science created. And so when you have comedian shills like that coming out and admitting, everyone kind of knows now that this was a biological weapon or a virus that was experimented and at the very least was leaked out accidentally. At the very most, it was something that was put out intentionally. And so if China put out this intentionally, and again, like I think the whole story is bogus. I think that they're blaming China for whatever reason, right? Like China's, whatever agreement they have here, whatever reason, that this is the story, but this is the official story. And so if they believe in the official story, and so if they believe that this was, what they're putting out there now to the American people, that China accidentally released a biological weapon that has created havoc around the world, there should be real frickin' consequences. This is the kind of thing where the world community should go and just hammer China. All the things that are done to other countries like this. This is one of the worst things done to the whole globe. And they have nothing. They have no real response for this, which is, which shows you the official story isn't true or they're completely helpless to do anything.
And transparency. Transparency matters across the board.
Transparency matters.
And I think the idea that, for example, one of the things I raised and others raised, I wasn't the only one who raised.
Just be sure that he was one amongst many voices.
This is the G7, is that we don't know, we haven't had access to the laboratories to determine whether or not, I have not reached a conclusion because our intelligence community is not certain yet, whether or not.
See, what Fauci said in the email is that you can they could just break down the virus in terms of what it's made, how it's made, what's its makeup, to see whether it's been manipulated by people or not. They can just look at the genomes. That's what Fauci was saying. And so they know what's in the virus. And so everybody already knows where this came from, or at least that it was manipulated in some way. And so for him to say his intelligence community hasn't they don't know yet, that's BS. Like, that's, again, him just being a liar.
This was a consequence of from the marketplace of a bat.
Wait, bats have marketplaces?
This was a consequence of from the marketplace of a bat, and interfacing with animals and the environment.
That they know that's not true. Like they don't even eat bats there. Like there's no bat.
Environment that caused this COVID-19, or whether it was an experiment gone awry in a laboratory. It's important to know the answer to that, because we have to have access. We have to build a system whereby we can know when we see another lack of transparency.
What? Dude, this is just JoJo. Let's just go through that again here. It's just him having some internet problems here, but
We can know when we see another lack of transparency. Another pandemic. We have to. The world.
we got to know when we have another one just like this. Is it a bat's fault, or is it been manipulated by people? We got to have this transparency so we know if we can blame the bat or we can blame a lab. I don't know what. Transparent, lack of transparency.
The world has to have access. So we're trying to figure out at the G7 whether we could put together an international. This will have a bottom line with what the transparency.
So there's some problems with this video. There's some glitchiness, and JoJo's glitchy. There's too much glitchy. JoJo glitching and the video glitching. But let's move forward to Putin.
Thank you very much. About Vladimir Putin in your meeting this week, as you're well aware, the U.S. has been slapping sanctions on Russia for years for its malign activities, and Russia has not stopped. So what specifically will you do differently?
Let's get the mask working, and it's not working very well.
To change Vladimir Putin's behavior?
Well, first of all, there's no guarantee you can change a person's behavior or the behavior of his country.
Wait a minute, there's none? You just can't just snap your fingers and change other people's behavior? There's no guarantee of that?
Autocrats have enormous power. They don't have to answer to a public. And the fact is that it may very well be, if I respond in kind, which I will, that it doesn't dissuade him. He wants to keep going. But I think that we're going to be moving in a direction where Russia has its own dilemmas, let us say, dealing with its economy, dealing with COVID, and dealing with not only the United States but Europe writ large and the Middle East. And so there's a lot going on where we could work together with Russia. For example,
He's just struggling. I mean, JoJo.
in Libya, we should be opening up the passes to be able to go through and provide food assistance and vital assistance to a population that's in real trouble.
Because your administration, or Obama's administration, carried out an illegal and immoral war in Libya, regime change, and then looted the country. But now we want to go in and help the people, because we're not animals, right?
I think I'm going to try very much hard to. It is, and by the way,
He's going to try hard. He's not going to give it he's going to give it a good hard college try.
there's places where I shouldn't be starting off and negotiating in public here, but let me say it this way. Russia has engaged in activities which we believe are contrary to international norms, but they have also
The fact is that that's a lie. Like, Putin knows because he's already said it. And I know. And if I know, pretty much most of these other people know. Like, I'm just some dude with a computer, right? If I can find this stuff out, then they all know that America does the same things. In fact, all the Snowden revelations, where America can just take down all the electrical grids of these various countries. And this is, these cyber attacks can be done everywhere, and manipulating elections, regime change, interfering with other countries. America's done that more than anybody else. And the idea here is that America is the beacon of freedom and liberty, and that it is, we're the heroes and good guys. So when we do something, we're taking down a bad guy. But we know, anybody who does any sort of research knows that Gaddafi, even though he was kind of odd, was a good leader for his country. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming. His country was moving in the right direction. And because of his wanting to sell oil in the gold dinar and a threat to the petrodollar, he was taken out. And that's just evil. There's no way around it, right? Like, that was not a just act. But it saved us from economic collapse and the world from economic collapse. So it had to be done in our, in the way that our, beastly system works. But no one should be saying, like, we're the heroes, right? There's all these suffering people around the globe because of American weapons, American military, American intelligence community, and things like this. The looting of other countries.
Bitten off some real problems they're going to have trouble chewing on. And for example, the rebuilding of Syria, of Libya, this is...
You mean 2 countries that were wrecked by America? Like, they didn't cause problems there. You guys did. By your Arab Spring. Like, he's blaming that on Russia. The rebuilding of Libya after Obama destroyed it and didn't need to be destroyed, and then invading Syria, and then the Russians stopping you.
They're there. And as long as they're there without the ability to bring about some order in the region, and you can't do that very well without providing for the basic economic needs of people. So I'm hopeful that we can find an accommodation where we can save the lives of people for example, in Libya.
After you guys destroyed it, look at this MNFer. Like, I know a lot about this because it really bothered me that my country was going in, as much as I identify as being an American, my country was going into a country and wrecking that country when it was clear it was a made-up BS reason that's come out in the Hillary Clinton email leak. It's come out by the British Parliament. I mean, all these people, have come out, substantial people in the mainstream, system have come out and said, yeah, it was a bogus war, and they wrecked this country and looted it. America and France and the UN more than anybody else. And so this MNFer, who is a big part of that, is going to go up there and just lie, and blame this on Russia that had nothing to do with Libya.
That consistent with the interest of, maybe for different reasons, but reached for the same reason, the same result.
I want to ask you about a comment that Vladimir Putin said today, but why do you think he hasn't changed his behavior in spite of everything the U.S. has done to this point?
He's Vladimir Putin. I'm not going to get into much more than that because I've got to sit down with him, and I'll be happy to talk after that.
But he said to them, just to conclude, today he said that Russia would be ready to hand over cyber criminals to the United States if the U.S. would do the same to Russia. And an agreement came out to that kind of a trade with Vladimir Putin.
Yes, I'm open to, if there's crimes committed against Russia, that in fact the people committing those crimes being harbored in the United States, I'm committed to holding them accountable. I heard that, I was told as I was flying here, that he said that actually a good sign.
The European allies. Can I ask a question about the European allies?
I'm going to get in trouble with my staff. Yeah, go ahead, but I pretend that you didn't answer you.
Thank you very much, sir.
I'm going to get in trouble with my staff, but go ahead and pretend I didn't answer you. He just said in a press conference. His staff is, are they beating the poor old guy? Like, what are they doing? Putting him in timeout? I'm going to be in trouble. I'm going to have timeout but go ahead, but pretend I didn't say anything. So here's another press conference, and this one he, is talking more off the cuff, and you can see the difference here.
Concluded we're going to prove them wrong. And now I'm happy to take some questions. Cecilia Vega of ABC.
Thank you so much, sir. Good evening. You mentioned your sit down with Vladimir Putin and Russian aggression that came up in your conversations today. I'd like to ask you 2 questions, if I may, on that front. Is it your sense walking into this meeting that Americans back home shouldn't expect much in terms of an outcome? Could you provide some specifics on what a successful meeting?
He's just so smug. Like, he thinks he's rocking it, and that's like one of the big problems. Like, he's a complete tool. Like, everyone kind of knows, and they don't want to acknowledge it. I mean, this is where it's an embarrassment for people who voted for him. You have to do some severe rationalization and reworking reality to make this like it's, he's doing a good job.
Meeting would look like to you? Are there going to be specific concessions you want Putin to make? And then I'll just give you my follow-up right now. You've met Vladimir Putin before. What have you learned about him that informs how you approach this sit-down with him? And what's your mindset walking into a meeting with a former KGB agent who you've said has no soul?
Again, everyone needs a soul to exist. You can, one of the great, sort of recent, revelations in the Heartfulness Meditation, the current master, Kamlesh Patel Daji, was talking about how it's the subtle bodies. You have these subtle bodies, these energetic bodies. The causal body is the soul. That's what creates your physical body and creates your life. But your soul is unchangeable. And then you have these other subtle bodies, the mind, the manas, right? These various things I've covered in previous videos. And what he said is those are the things that evolve and change. And those have to do with your essence, your ego, right? And so it's, a part of your soul, but your soul is something that is the same. It's the part of you that's divine, the part of you that's God, the part of you that has a, divine manifestation. But then you have these subtle bodies, these energetic fields that make up your personality, your ego, your who you are as an essence. And those are the things that evolve. And a person cannot live without a soul. A soulless, you can't have some sort of, even an animal has, a spiritual essence. Nothing can be alive or can be manifested even in the form of rocks and things without spiritual input. It's like the code on the internet. You need the code to create something on the internet. And so you can't say someone else doesn't have a soul. What you can say is their subtle bodies are corrupt, that they've gone in the wrong direction, they're working against God, they're twisted around and they're going backwards and they're oppositional to the whole. But for him to say, like, he could say he has no soul, come on. Like, again, this guy, this evil MNFer in his own right.
I'll tell you all that when it's over. Look, I've been doing this a long time.
Yeah, and you've been sucking at it the whole time. Like, you've never been good.
The last thing anyone would do is negotiate in front of the world press as to how he's going to approach a critical meeting with another adversary and or someone who could be an adversary.
Well, which is it?
It's the last thing I'm going to do.
But I will say,
I will tell you this. I'm going to make clear to President Putin that there are areas where we can cooperate if he chooses. And if he chooses not to cooperate and acts in a way that he has in the past relative to cybersecurity and some other activities, then we will respond. We will respond in kind. There need not be. We should decide where it's in our mutual interest, in the interest of the world, to cooperate and see if we can do that. And the areas where we don't agree, make it clear what the red lines are.
He's got red lines. You've seen him.
I have met with him. He's bright. He's tough. And I have found that he is as they say, when he used to play ball, a worthy adversary.
When he used to play ball, he doesn't play ball anymore, but he remembers of worthy adversaries.
But the fact is that I will be happy to talk with you when it's over, not before.
Yeah, like what? Her personally?
About what the discussion will entail. Nancy Cordes, CBS.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also have two questions about Vladimir Putin. The first is, have any of the world leaders you've met with this week expressed concern that by meeting with President Putin this early in your presidency, that it'll look like you're rewarding him?
What's your second question?
The second question is what it will mean for the U.S.-Russia relationship if Alexei Navalny were to die or be held in prison.
Every world leader here as a member of NATO that spoke today, and most of them mentioned it, thanked me for meeting with Putin now.
Yeah, Joe, they're treating you like you're, have Alzheimer's.
Every single one that spoke. And I think there were probably about 10 or 12 that spoke to it, saying they were happy that I did that I was going to do that. And they thought
he did that. He's going to do that.
Thought it was thoroughly appropriate that I do.
They thought it was thoroughly appropriate. He's like a 2-year-old.
And I had discussions with them about
discussions with them.
Be open about what they thought was important from their perspective and what they thought was not important.
What was important and not important? Those are the two options.
And so the interesting thing is, I know, and I'm not being critical of the press. I really mean this. Give my word.
He's giving his word. Like usually, now this is, you might be lying before, but he's definitely telling the truth now.
But generically, you all thought, was Biden meeting him too soon? I haven't found a world leader who doesn't think it's not soon. It's just soon enough.
It's not soon enough, just soon enough. What? Who said that?
Everyone that I've spoken to, privately and publicly. It doesn't mean there aren't some out there, but it's not likely that a head of state is going to stand up in front of 29 other heads of state and say, boy, I'm glad you're doing this, in effect. So there's a consensus.
What? No, not doing this or doing it too soon.
And they thanked me for being willing to talk with them about the meeting and what I intended to do.
So you just blabbed it out to the world governmental leaders ahead of time what you're going to say, and hoping they wouldn't tell Putin.
So I haven't found any reluctance. There may be someone, but not in open today or in the meetings I privately had as well. Jeff Zelny, CNN.
Sir, good evening. Thank you. In a weekend interview, Vladimir Putin laughed at the suggestion that you had called him a killer. Is that still your belief, sir, that he is a killer? And I'll continue the trend if you don't mind of asking a second question. Do you believe if he does agree to cooperate, then what kind of a challenge do you find yourself?
Look at JoJo. Look at his, look at him. I've already covered this. It's clear, though. It's better reception. I'm glad it's coming up again.
And I'll continue the trend if you don't mind of asking a second question. Do you believe if he does agree to cooperate, then what kind of a challenge do you find yourself in? How would you ever trust him? And if Ronald Reagan said trust but verify, what do you say to Vladimir Putin?
To answer the first question.
That makes me laugh.
I'm laughing too.
That was the fakest laugh ever, bro. That's what I gotta see that again. I missed this part.
Reagan said trust but verify. What do you say to Vladimir Putin?
To answer the first question. I'm laughing too.
That was just sad, bro. Like everyone knows it's a fake laugh.
They actually, well, look, I mean, he has made clear that
Bueller.
The answer is, I believe he has in the past essentially acknowledged that he was there are certain things that he would do or did do. But
Look, America murdered Gaddafi. Hillary Clinton, there was evidence that she told him to come out, and he put up a white flag, and then there were these American-supported militia or whatever you want to call them that were brought in by America. They weren't even Libyan nationals that murdered Gaddafi in a horrible, gruesome way.
So, that is the land of unconfirmed.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Did it have anything to do with your visit?
No, I'm sure it did.
And then all the Libyan people. Everybody, that was a murderous war. Like, these wars are a country saying they legally get to kill other people in other countries. Obama droned MNFers, right? And so, this is something that we do in America, every leader does, in America more than others because of our commitment to, spending 60% on our military budget, to say nothing of handing out weapons, giving weapons to killers, selling them or whatever else in the military-industrial complex, or just sometimes handing them out and arming the world.
when I was asked that question on air, I answered it honestly. But it's not.
Yeah, well, why are you walking it back right now? You're going to meet with the guy. You said he had no soul, and he's a killer. How can you possibly, he has no soul, but I'm going to go in there and trust him. He's basically Satan or a demon. Maybe not Satan, but a demon. But I'm going to go in there and meet with him, and maybe he'll give us a couple of promises I can,
Not much of a. I don't think it matters a whole lot in terms of this next meeting we're about to have. The second question was I'd verify first and then trust. In other words, everything would have to be shown to be actually occurring. It's not about trusting. It's about agreeing.
He's just horrible. This guy's just embarrassing himself and really, embarrassing all the people that voted for him. And those people are in denial themselves. But this guy is a complete joke. He can't do this job. He's not capable because we saw it in the debates, right? This is, the debate performance, but now he's president. He just can't handle questions. His mind doesn't work right. He was never great. He was always a fumbling gaffe magnet. He's always been a tool. And now he's, got some sort of dementia going on. He's mentally breaking down.
When you write treaties with your adversaries, you don't say, I trust you. You say, this is what I expect. And if you violate the agreement you made, then the treaty's off, the agreement's off. And I'm hoping that President Putin concludes that there is some interest in terms of his own interest in changing the perception that the world has of him in terms of whether or not he will engage in behavior that's more consistent with what is considered to be appropriate behavior for head of state.
See, the thing is, America is, with presidents changing every 4 years possibly, or at least after 8 years, there has to be a system in place to guarantee, because of America being so powerful, the number one country economically and in terms of military. Now China is definitely, making a bid to be number one. And really many people are saying China's already taken over America's place. But for America to be considered stable, then the intelligence community and the foreign relations community and a lot of these things that are policies have to transfer over from one president to the other. They can't have a president coming in and redoing all these things that they've been working for. These institutions, the military institution, the foreign policy institution, the economic policies, all these things, a president can't come in and really change much of these things, or everyone would flip out, right? And so when Trump was elected, he didn't follow through on a lot of these things, but he still towed the line to whatever extent. But for Biden to come in and talk about consistency, Putin's been there for a long time. And if he's saying that everyone's freaked out that Trump was leaving NATO and doing what he was doing, he says this over and over again, blaming Trump. Well, Trump might be president again 4 years. You know, there's people who think it's going to happen in August, you know, the hopium addicts. But, like, Trump could be president again and undo all these things. And so, you know, I mean, there's a lot of evidence to support that that's likely to happen.
Ann Guerin, The Washington Post.
Thank you, Mr. President. Here at this meeting and earlier at the G7, you've said several times that America is back at allies' side. But a lot of those allies are themselves pretty rattled by what happened on January 6th, an attempted overturning of your election. And they may...
It's his election. It wasn't our election. It was his. Overturning his election. Like, that was crazy when they tried to overturn his election.
Still be alarmed by the continued hold that Donald Trump has over the Republican Party and the rise of nationalist figures like...
In fact, she's saying what I just said.
him around the world. What do you say to those allies? What have you been saying to them at these meetings about how the next president of the United States can keep any promises you make?
What I'm saying is to them.
What I'm saying is to them, I mean. Like, he just can't, he's just gurgling.
Is watch me. I mean...
That doesn't answer the question, JoJo Magoo. Watch me. Watch me. Watch me. That is great.
Watch me. Watch me. Watch me.
That was just wonderful.
What I'm saying is to them is watch me.
Watch me. What's that? It's one of those lines from the movie The Mask. Smoking, right? Watch me. And so, you know, what she asked was, how can you say, like, this things that you're doing, repairing the damage from Trump, is going to last when Trump might be president in 4 years? And his answer was, watch me. Watch me.
Watch me. I mean, I'm not saying anything, quite frankly. I'm just going out. People, as I...
But I thought you said watch me.
Said before, don't doubt that I mean what I say, and they believe that I keep my commitments when I say it. I'm not making any promises to anyone that I don't believe are overwhelmingly likely to be kept. I think...
What? What are you saying? Like, so America, like, you know, right now, with the way things are going, and, you know, whatever situation they put out there in terms of the next election, I mean, how that plays out, rigged or not or whatever. But, you know, I mean, Biden, like, he'll be 88 and he's just breaking down mentally. Nobody likes Kamala. And so he might not be able even to run for president in 4 years. And so, you know, it's going to be Kamala. Like, Kamala, like, is so unlikable. She's already sucking it up in the border crisis.
I think that we're at a moment where, I mean, let me put it this way. You may have had a different view, but I think an awful lot of people thought that my showing up at the G7 would not produce any kind of enthusiasm about American leadership and about where America was. I would suggest that it didn't turn out that way.
They're looking at you like you're a lost, doddering fool. Like, I've already covered this. You're wandering around lost. You're talking out of turn. Like Boris Johnson, or whatever his name is, had to, you know, shut you up because you were interrupting his, you know, trying to lead a meeting. You're lost and clueless. Like, he doesn't even know because he's clueless.
I would suggest that there is the leaders I'm dealing with in NATO and the G7 are leaders who know our recent history, know generically the character of the American people, and know where the vast center of the public stance. Not Democrat, Republican, but who we are. We're a decent, honorable nation.
Come on, bro. Like, you even believe that? Are you that lost? I live here and I know. Just check out the internet. There's no decency or honor on it. And that's where everybody's chatting, buddy. There's no decency and honor aren't a requirement on the internet.
And I think that they have seen things happen as we have that shocked them and surprised them that could have happened. But I think they, like I do, believe the American people are not going to sustain that kind of behavior.
The divide that's here is real. This isn't going away. This isn't going to be healed, right? We'll see what happens because they rig everything. It's controlled. But the world leaders, like if there's a real democracy and everyone can see what kind of president you're going to be and then how this is going to play out in 4 years. Like, where will he be mentally and physically when he's 88 years old, which is really old. I mean, that's, you should, like, as far as I can tell, where I am right now, the next, I don't know, and I'm, young for my age, right? But when you're in your 60s, that's probably a good time where you're not so physical anymore. You're not so wrapped up in your, the early years of adulthood when you're in your 20s and 30s, and you're on the back half of your life in your 40s and 50s. But you get up to 70 or 80, like I can tell right now, my mind doesn't work as well as it did in different ways when I was younger. And so where there's wisdom, you lose sharpness. And he's never had wisdom, and so all that's happens is he's lost his sharpness.
So I don't want to get into these statistics because, that old phrase is Disraeli's, there's three kinds of lies, damn lies, and statistics. But I think it's appropriate to say that the Republican Party is vastly diminished in numbers. The leadership of the Republican Party is fractured, and the Trump wing of the party is the bulk of the party, but it makes up a significant minority of the American people.
So he has just dismissed the 33% and the 70 whatever million votes that Trump got. He's just dismissed all that. I want to come back to this at the end because that's a huge statement right there. He's saying that their opinions don't matter, and he is selling all those Americans out that believe in Trump to the Europeans and saying, yeah, you guys all know those guys are crazy. It's a small minority of the people, but it's, Trump has a good 30% of the population that are his diehard fans. And there was, quite a number of votes, the most votes in history. And so Trump got the second most votes in history. Of course, many people think JoJo didn't get all those other votes. And I want to come back to all of this at the end of the video.
And we'll see. We'll see. I believe that by us standing up and saying what we believe to be the case, not engaging in the overwhelming hyperbole that gets engaged in by so many today, that I guess that old expression, the proof of the pudding is in the eating.
Okay, bro.
It is a shock and surprise that what's happened in terms of the consequence of President Trump's phony populism.
Phony populism. That's the problem. Bernie Sanders and Trump were both populist candidates. They talked to the American people. Where Joe Biden and the rest of these candidates and all the Republican candidates were, well, I got to vote for somebody, right? I'm not going to vote for Democrats, so I'll vote for a Republican. I'm not going to vote for Republicans, so I'll vote for Joe Biden, right? I'm not going to vote for Trump, so I'll vote for Joe Biden. Like, he couldn't get anybody to show up at his rally because nobody buys this stuff, right? I mean, there's, the people that voted for him, that he was going to be so much better than Trump, were, look at him. Look at this guy up there stumbling around, failing, not understanding what's going on, right? And him saying phony populism, which means that there's, people that are into what Trump had to say. And I'm not one of them. Like, I like Trump as a character. Like, I knew, you can see through Trump it's not hard to. But in terms of this phony populism, Trump was appealing to and connecting with his fan base, his voters. And you haven't been able to do that because you're a manufactured candidate. This was a complete contrived election all the way through the primaries and the way that the media and everybody handled this.
Has happened. And it is disappointing that so many of my Republican colleagues in the Senate, who I know better, have been reluctant to take on, for example, an investigation because they're worried about being primaried. But at the end of the day, we've been through periods like this in American history before, where there has been this reluctance to take a chance on your reelection because of the nature of your party's politics at the moment. I think this is passing. I don't mean easily passing. That's why it's so important that I succeed in my agenda.
Because we're not going to get a second chance. The division in America, which was caused by, Trump was divisive, but so was Hillary. And now it's just, there's people that will never, there's people who are literally rooting for Putin over Biden in this, whatever they're doing. There's lots of people that are rooting for Putin. Many people watching this video are rooting for Putin. Like, I don't care. Like, this isn't a real contest to me. But there's lots of people that are rooting for a foreign leader over the president because they despise him and everything that happened. And so that's not going away. Like, that's burned into people's psyches. And there's a lot of hatred here. Like, again, stuff I don't, hatred is inside you. Hatred is, you have your hatred. I talk about this with the Heartfulness Meditation. That hatred is something to be removed. Your hatred, there's the object of your hate, and there's the hate that's inside of you. And hate is bad for everybody. But that's there. And it's getting worse. People are, the agenda and the way that the liberals and the socialists and the people are pushing this agenda on the right-wing people, on a social level, on a political level, and there's going to be a response in some way or another. It's going to take it's going to take form in some way. And life is just going to get worse in America the next 4 years. And, we'll see what happens then. I don't even know if they'll be in America in 4 years. Like 2025, there's supposed to be a big event, right? And so we're, it's going in the wrong direction. For, on a material level, on a spiritual level, we're going exactly where we're supposed to go. This is supposed to happen. It's just unpleasant.
The agenda, whether it's dealing with the vaccine, the economy, infrastructure, it's important that we demonstrate we can make progress and continue to make progress. And I think we're going to be able to do that. So, as I said, the proof will be in where it is, 6 months from now, where we are. But I think you're going to see that there's...
You're going to be like you're going to be just drooling on yourself. Like, it's your mental breakdown that everybody's watching, right?
That, God willing, we're going to be making progress, and there's going to be a coalescing of a lot of Republicans, particularly younger Republicans who are coming up in the party.
So the Democrats really picked a winner here. So I want to just get through. This is a long video. I have a thing I want to do on the EU where he just is breaking down. There's a gaffe I'm going to get to maybe tonight. And I have sort of this revelation. I made a voiceover about that. I have poor internet still, so it's like, doing outside projects. But I want to cover on a comprehensive level. And the Putin meeting happened today. So Putin and Biden met, and they had press conferences. And I want to go through maybe his second press conference. But this is JoJo breaking down. Like, if you just look at the individual gaffes, it just looks like typical JoJo Magoo stuff. But if you look at his comprehensive breakdown and some of the truth that he revealed about what he believes, because what he's saying here at the end is that the Republicans that voted for Trump don't matter, the 72 million of them, and many of them think that Biden didn't get 80 million votes, but I believe Biden could have, because people are so messed up, right? Both sides, it's easy when you're like you can, dismiss both sides as being a part of the systemic problem. You see it in a much clearer way. But what Biden's saying here is that the Trump people don't matter. They're going to be washed away in history. The Republican Party is breaking down. The leadership is breaking down, right? All these things. Like he's just dismissing Trump's support in phony populism because these other candidates, people don't like them. They have to vote for somebody. They think they have to vote for somebody. But the big turnout came from, Trump. It wasn't Biden that created the big turnout. Biden wouldn't have got that much of a turnout if it was somebody else, or if Biden hadn't been hidden in his basement, right? And so they hid Biden away, and now you can see what happens when Biden isn't hidden away. He talks out of turn, he embarrasses himself, embarrasses the country. He's walking around like some clueless, doddering old man walking into restaurants. He goes off on reporters because he's got a temper, because he's got dementia and things. Like he's not capable of doing the job. And I want to cover this more on a comprehensive level. Again, longer videos to come. But you can see it here more than ever. This is Biden demonstrating. They can't hide him away. And you see what you got with this guy. And when you look at like the lengthy, interactions he has and his point of view, they just think, if you have liberal friends or if you're, involved with whatever's going on right now with the government, what they're saying to all of us that don't want to do certain things that have to do with COVID, right? We don't want to, submit to certain things. They want to force us. They want to force us. And I'm not a Trump supporter, but those of us who don't believe in Biden and believe in this, whatever they're trying to push. And again, it doesn't come from populism, like he just admitted. Like, Trump's a populist candidate. That's why Biden couldn't get anybody to show up on his rallies. Biden might have gotten that many votes. I don't know if he did or not. But in terms of his populism, people don't really like him. Majority of Americans don't like Biden and don't believe what's going on here. They just hated Trump and, they're Democrats or whatever, and they're trying to force their point of view and their policies and their social agenda on the rest of us. And we don't matter. Like we're just, these people who are too stupid to know what's going on, right? That's how they view us, these elitists, these, so-called educated people. And they just want to push all this stuff through, whether we like it or not. And that's what's happening. We all experience this. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.